Good morning, everyone. My name is Dr. Mike Torres, and I am the Director of the Curriculum Frameworks and Instructional Resources Division at the CDE. I would like to thank all of you who joined us for this webinar today to hear about the Arts, Music, and Instructional Materials Discretionary Block Grant. It's so anticipated. But before we jump in, I'd like to introduce you to Cheryl Cotton, the Deputy Superintendent of Public Instruction.
I am excited to kick off this webinar to share information about our new funding source available to districts. This discretionary block grant has the potential to create real progress for California schools as they work to enhance arts education as well as professional development and instructional resources in a wide array of content areas. Governor Newsom signed the Education Trailer Bill AB 181, establishing, and AB 185, amending the Arts, Music, and Instructional Materials Discretionary Block Grant, which provides close to $3.6 billion in apportionment on an ADA basis to local education agencies. This represents a tremendous opportunity for districts across the state to invest state dollars where they will have the most positive impact on student learning. Thank you all for attending this webinar to hear more about this. I pass it back to you, Dr. Torres.
Thank you so much, Deputy Superintendent Cotton. And I know that this webinar is much anticipated. It's a large sum of money, and LEAs are very eager to be able to use these funds. So the purpose of today's webinar is to inform LEAs about the Arts, Music, and Instructional Materials Discretionary Block Grant, to discuss the possible uses of block grant funding at the local level across the 5 different areas that are specified in legislation, to explain how the funds will be allocated and apportioned to LEAs, and to answer any questions you may have. We will be using the Q&A feature of this webinar. Most questions posed in the Q&A will be answered live, with the remaining answered at the end of today's presentation. And as a side note, this webinar is being recorded and will be available on CFERD's webpage for future reference. So as you heard Deputy Cotton say, the state appropriated $3.6 billion that can be spent among 5 specific areas. Those areas are standards-aligned professional development and instructional materials in specific subject areas, professional development on improving school culture, acquiring diverse and culturally relevant book collections, operational costs, and COVID personal protective equipment. LEAs are encouraged, but not required, to proportionally use these funds for instructional resources and professional development, as well as to create or maintain arts and music education programs. After all, it is called the Arts and Music and Instructional Materials Discretionary Block Grant. The block grant funding may be used in any combination of the 5 areas listed in the legislation and will be apportioned on an ADA basis. As you'll hear later in this webinar from our colleagues in the School Fiscal Services Division, money will be available beginning this December and can be encumbered through June of 2026. The first category for expenditures detailed in the legislation is for standards-aligned, if appropriate, professional development and instructional materials in 10 different subject areas. That includes visual and performing arts, world languages, mathematics, science, including environmental literacy, English language arts, including early literacy, ethnic studies, financial literacy, computer literacy, media literacy, and history social science. I'd like to pause to note that State Superintendent of Public Instruction held a webinar on September 27th to talk about a partnership with NextGen Personal Finance to boost financial literacy across the state. Because the opportunities here are so extensive, CDE will be holding a second webinar on October 19th next week to dive further into some of the state recommended resources in each of these subject areas, including arts and music, in order to provide LEAs with resources and ideas should they decide to use their block grant funding toward professional development and instructional materials. In addition, subject matter experts in the Educator Excellence and Equity Division and the Curriculum Frameworks and Instructional Resources Division will be creating and posting mini webinars on the CDE website. In the meantime, you can visit the CFERD website where you can access standards, frameworks, a list of state-adopted instructional materials, and other resources for all content areas. CFRD also posted just 2 days ago a guidance webpage for this block grant. The document with all the links in this presentation can be found in the chat. In the meantime, we have Eve Fabiashi from the Educator Excellence and Equity Division to give a brief overview on professional development opportunities that LEAs may wish to consider. Handing it off to Eve.
Thank you, Dr. Torres. When discussing professional learning, or PL, there are elements of a quality PL system that are most likely to support educators in building individual and collective capacity. The Quality Professional Learning Standards, or the QPLS, identify these elements and serve as a foundation for the content, processes, and conditions essential to all educator professional learning over time, which leads to improved educator knowledge, skills, and dispositions. There are 7 interdependent standards that support professional learning that is rooted in student and educator needs. A link to the Quality Professional Learning Standards, as well as the other resources that we're going to share, are included in the accompanying resource document. As we look into providing professional learning standards and opportunities, it is recommended to review your Local Control and Accountability Plan, or your LCAP, a tool for local educational agencies to set goals, plan actions, and leverage resources to meet those goals to improve student outcomes. The LCAP provides an opportunity for local educational agencies, or LEAs, to share their stories of how, what, and why programs and services are selected to meet their local needs. The funds from this discretionary block grant can also be used to provide professional learning and acquire instructional materials that may not have been initially included in your LCAP. For example, funds from this discretionary block grant may be used for PL and instructional materials for visual and performing arts, ethnic studies, computer science, elementary science, and mathematics. The California Digital Learning Integration and Standards Guidance provides strategies to build educator and system capacity. It provides distance learning curriculum and instructional guidance for mathematics, English language arts, and English language. The guidance is based on foundational research-based digital learning practices, including engaging in personal interaction, building classroom communities, promoting collaboration, incorporating authentic assessment, designing active learning activities, and cultivating student-centered opportunities to build agency. There are numerous professional learning opportunities available in each content area. We will review some ways to access content-specific professional development in order to provide you with the resources to find what best serves your own local needs. The CDE's Professional Learning Curriculum Areas webpage contains sections that are specific to professional learning in the content areas. The CDE also maintains listservs with regular communication about upcoming professional learning events and resources. In addition, the CDE maintains Twitter accounts that promote current professional learning opportunities and resources. The provided document contains links to all web pages, listservs, and Twitter accounts mentioned on the following slides. To start, the CDE has web pages for the arts, world languages, and English language arts, and maintains listservs for world languages and English language arts. The CDE also recently updated the recommended literature list for all content areas. There are several literacy grant programs that are in progress and frequently offer professional learning opportunities to the field. You may wish to subscribe to the listserv to get the latest information. In addition, the CDE has web pages for media literacy, ethnic studies, financial literacy, and history social science. The CDE maintains a listserv for history social science, which also contains information about ethnic studies and financial literacy. Follow the CDE's History, Social Science, and Professional Learning Twitter accounts for the latest professional learning opportunities and resources. If you have any questions about these content areas, please contact us at the Professional Learning Innovations Office at plio@cde.ca.gov. In addition, the CDE has web pages for mathematics, science, and computer science. The California Mathematics Readiness Grant provides professional learning for secondary educators to support the implementation and evaluation of grade 12 experiences that are designed to prepare pupils for placement into college-level courses in mathematics. The 2021 Educator Workforce Investment Grant Computer Science provides ongoing professional learning for educators throughout the year. If you have any questions about these content areas, please contact us at the Professional Learning Support and Monitoring Office at plsmo@cde.ca.gov. And now it is my pleasure to introduce my colleague, Alexis Clift.
Thank you, Eve. Hello, my name is Alexis Clift, and I'm a consultant in the Educator Excellence and Equity Division. I'm here to mention some additional professional learning programs and areas that the Teacher and Leader Policy Office is excited to promote. Specifically, this grant supports professional development that is standards aligned and/or improves school culture. This can include the National Board for Professional Teaching Standards Subsidy and Incentive Programs, educator preparation, such as mentorships and induction, and private school professional development. For more information on any of these programs, please contact the Teacher and Leader Policy Office at tlpo@cde.ca.gov. And now I'd like to hand it over to Tom Herman from the Whole Child Division. Tom.
Okay, thank you, Alexis. This is Dr. Tom Herman from the School Health and Safety Office within the Whole Child Division. The next category of allowable expenditures of the block grant funding is for professional development on improving school climate and culture. The following allowable expenditures are not meant to be an exhaustive list, but rather represent a broader list of possible ways to include school climate. Such efforts in improving school climate and culture are known to increase student engagement, decrease various youth risk behaviors such as violence, harassment, bullying, drug, alcohol use, and vaping, and increase student achievement. The allowable expenditures listed are training and de-escalation in restorative justice strategies, asset-based pedagogies, anti-bias, transformative social emotional learning, media literacy, digital literacy, physical education, and learning through play. To discuss the third funding category in the block grant legislation, I'd like to introduce Alejandro Hernandez from CDE's Instructional Resources Unit.
Good morning. My name is Alejandro Hernandez. On the topic of diverse and culturally relevant book collections, I'd like to mention that culturally relevant texts are generally understood to encompass books, articles, comic books, ebooks, and other written or printed works that are relevant to students' home and community experiences. The topics, events, and languages these texts include recognize, understand, and validate students' customs, characteristics, perspectives, and ethnic heritage. Next slide. Here we see the term diverse book collections. This term is intentionally broad to encompass classroom and school libraries. Not only should texts be culturally relevant to students, the intent is for these books to include a range of languages. California teachers and educators are encouraged to seek recommendations from their district or county office of education, as they may have criteria already for selecting reading materials. One example of a criterion might be that reading materials should be culturally and linguistically authentic. What do we mean? Well, the World Languages Framework indicates that authentic materials are designed for native language speakers by native speakers of the target language and cultures. Now, for more information, we have our school library expert, Renee Owsley-Swank.
Thank you, Alejandro. The California Department of Education maintains a list of recommended books in a range of languages. The recently updated recommended literature list is intended as a tool to assist districts as they select literature, and the list only recommends titles. Literature used in a school is determined by the district, and each district should have a selection policy that explains the procedures it uses for selecting literature that reflects the school's education mission, program, and the ages and interests of its students. The selection policy should include a description of the process for reconsidering the use of a title. Another excellent no-cost resource is teachingbooks.net. Teaching Books provides tools to assist in selecting titles, including access to information on the California recommended literature list, the ability to analyze your collection for diversity and inclusion, and has gained a reputation for doing an excellent job of addressing diversity. Teaching Books is provided at no cost to everyone in California through a partnership between the Riverside County Office of Education and the California State Library. We will be adding additional resources to the guidance web pages. Organizations such as the Curriculum and Instruction Steering Committee, often referred to as CISC, is in the process of compiling resources that offer books in a wide range of languages. Today, would like to share one example, Fondo de Cultura Económica, which features hundreds of books and ebooks in Spanish. And next slide, please. We would like to encourage those leading the selection of multilingual texts to engage the expertise of teacher librarians and the local education agency, as one of the many skills they possess is collection development. They are familiar with the tools used to obtain authentic quality materials. As a side note, when considering media and digital literacy, consult teacher librarians, as these literacies fall directly in their areas of expertise. Similarly, teachers of world languages can share their expertise of the goals of the world languages standards when reviewing or selecting texts for a multilingual library. When considering texts in a range of target languages, consider how culturally and linguistically authentic they are. Whenever possible, it is recommended to opt for authentic text over translation as a way to ensure the language and stories depicted are relevant to students' backgrounds, family life, and cultural experiences. Ultimately, it is the responsibility of the district to select high-quality literature according to the selection policies that are in place. And I'm now going to turn you over to Joe Anderson, Emergency Services Team in the School Facilities and Transportation Services Division, and he will be discussing operational cost and personal protective equipment. Thank you.
Thank you, Renee. So yes, operational costs are your day-to-day costs for running your school, and a few of the costs that are allowable under the block grant includes other post-employment benefits, custodial and maintenance personnel costs, increased utility costs, supplies, transportation, and technology. Just make sure that you consult with your legal counsel for questions on allowability of these costs specifically. And next slide, if we talk about the COVID personal protective equipment. So this is, the PPE that we're all very familiar with from responding to COVID. And these are just some of the common items. This is not an all-inclusive list. So the first item I have here are face coverings. So there are multiple types of face coverings as well, such as surgical masks, N95 and KN95 respirators. All of these prevent airborne transmission of the virus. So while all of these are disposable, some may be used multiple times. So just keep that in mind when you're ordering this, so that way you order appropriately for the group that you're ordering for. So other PPE that can be worn includes gowns, gloves, goggles, and face shields. And these are typically used in environments where there's a high probability of transmission. And cleaning supplies are very common to purchase as well for COVID, and this can include hand sanitizer, hand soap, and wipes. They're all helpful for cleaning hands and surfaces to prevent the virus from spreading there as well. Even though the virus is mostly airborne. And then there's a variety of tests for COVID-19. But what's recommended for schools is going to be the antigen test. And the reason why is because antigen tests tend to be much faster than other tests. You can get results within 15 minutes, so you can make the decision of whether to stay home or to keep the child in school, or the staff in school as well. It could be used for either. So there are two types of those types of antigen tests, and that's the professional test, which has to be supervised. Usually it's administered at the school by someone who's been trained. And then there's the at-home test or the over-the-counter test. It's the same thing, where it can be taken home and it can be self-administered there. There's also a PCR test, and this is a more sensitive test, but it is has to be done in a lab, so it takes more time, it costs more money, and it's more expertise to have it done. So that's not the recommended one for schools, but it is always an option that's out there as well. And so let's talk about ventilation upgrades as well. So the HVAC systems can be upgraded to filter out the virus. Also, air purifiers can improve indoor air quality. Just make sure you don't purchase anything that produces ozone in the classrooms. And then just keep in mind that PPE has a shelf life. Almost anything that you buy on here has a timer on it, not literally, but it has a time limit on it to ensure its efficacy. And if you pass that, then the efficacy will drop. So just keep that in mind when you're ordering, that you don't over order just because some things, like, for example, the hand sanitizer is considered a hazardous material. And when that expires and you want to get rid of it, you have to dispose of it as a hazardous material, which costs additional money for you. So again, this is not an all-inclusive list, but these are some ideas of how to keep pupils and staff safe from COVID-19 and kind of keep the school open and running in an in-person instruction environment. And with that, I'm just going to turn it over to Julie Klein-Briggs, who will discuss allocations and apportionments of the block grant. Thank you.
Great, thank you, Joe. So good morning, this is Julie Klein-Briggs with the Categorical Allocations and Audit Resolution, or CAR office within CDE's School Fiscal Services Division. Our office will be handling the allocation and apportionment of funds for the Arts, Music, and Instructional Materials Discretionary Block Grant. So this slide and the next provide some of the key fiscal details, and I think some of them have already been touched on in the past, but I'll touch briefly on each item. So eligible entities are identified in statute and include county offices of education, school districts, charter schools, and state special schools. The program is formula driven, and there is no application required in order to receive the funds. Our office will calculate proportional funding for each eligible entity based on prior year average daily attendance, or ADA. And more specifically, it is a reported ADA as of the 2020-21-22 second principal apportionment, multiplied by a calculated funding rate of approximately $666.08 per unit of ADA. So the amount calculated for each entity is referred to as the allocation. These amounts are now available on the CDE's website, and a link is provided in the resources document. The apportionments or payments will be released to eligible entities in 2 equal payments. We're planning for the first payment in December 2022 and the second payment in May 2023. Funds received are available for encumbrance through June 30th, 2026. Any amounts that are not encumbered by this date will need to be returned to the CDE. For accounting purposes, local educational agencies will use standardized account code structure, or SACS resource code 6762. And then any questions regarding the calculation or apportionment of funds may be directed to our office at caar@cde.ca.gov. Thank you. Now back to Dr. Torres.
Thank you so much, Julie. And thank you to all of our presenters this morning. So this webinar today has been an overview of the Arts, Music, and Instructional Materials Discretionary Block Grant. And we've described some of the resources that the California Department of Education has to assist LEAs as they put together their spending plans for their block grant funds. Because it's a lot to take in, I want to make sure that you know where to go for additional information and support. If you'd like to view this webinar again or share it with others who are unable to attend, a recording will be posted on the CDE website. We will also be hosting a second webinar next week on October 19th to dive more deeply into the professional development and instructional materials resources available at CDE in the different various content areas identified in legislation. The registration link is posted in the chat and can also be found on our website. So we are going to move on to our Q&A session. Now, throughout the presentation or throughout the webinar, our staff has been answering questions either live or in writing in the Q&A section. We do have a couple of questions that we'd like to answer live, and there are others that will, in all honesty, we'll need to continue to do some research and then post a response in our FAQs. But the first question will be, is there an expected date for RFAs, requests for applications? And to answer that question, I'm going to invite Julie Klein-Briggs back to give a response.
Thanks, Mike. An RFA is not required. This funding will be sent out using the apportionment process, which does not require an application from any eligible entity. We'll forward the funds out based on the schedule that I had indicated, and then LEAs and state special schools will need to comply with program requirements. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Julie. A second question is, can districts go back and use these funds for past purchases or only this year forward? And so again, I'm going to ask Julie Klein-Briggs to see if she can respond to that one.
Thanks, Mike. I'll probably need to confirm this one, but generally speaking, funds would be available starting with the beginning of the fiscal year. I think we'll follow up on that with a written response.
Thank you so much. All right, another question that we have is, can we use the money for library infrastructure, or is it just for books? So I'm going to ask Renee Osley-Swank if she is available to answer that question.
My understanding is from the legislation that it's for books. I would have to do more research if they could use it for infrastructure, but I believe it's for providing multi-literacy books.
Thank you. So there's the infrastructure question. Another question that's been asked is there a date that this must go to our school boards, the local school boards, or is it just prior to spending? And so the answer is there isn't a timeline. It's essentially before any of the funds can be spent, the plan must go before and be approved by your local school board. And then as we've talked about during the webinar presentation, the funds, they can be encumbered. So that's pretty much the only timeline that's been provided in legislation. All right. There's a question here. Is there a listserv for the arts, music, instructional materials discretionary block grant? There isn't one specifically for this block grant. We do have a listserv at CFERD for curriculum and instructional resources updates. And so we will occasionally push out updates, especially when we have our FAQ page up and running. So that's a listserv that you may want to join, and we can push out a link in the chat here in a little bit. There was a confirmation question about, so CDE will not provide a sample template for the plan that needs to go before the local school board. And the answer to that is there is no requirement in the legislation that CDE does so. And so CDE will not be providing a sample template. Continuing to look through the questions. Here's a question again for Julie Klein-Briggs at School Fiscal Services. Are state preschools included in the ADA calculation?
Thanks, Mike. The answer to that is no. Eligible entities are school districts charter schools and state special schools. Preschools would not be included.
Thank you so much, Julie. Another question is there a minimal percentage that must be used for the arts? Although the legislation says it's the intent of the legislature that a proportional amount of the funds goes to arts and music, there is not a specified percentage amount that needs to go to it. Right. There was a question just asked about, do schools need to ask for the block grant? And I believe Julie answered that question, that it will automatically be calculated and provided. All right. Are there any caps on the spending encumbrances? Could all of the funds be used in one area, or must the funding be spread out over all categories? So, and Julie, I'm not sure if you have a response to this one, but I don't recall anything in legislation that gives any kind of proportion or any kind of formula for how the money should be spent. All right, there's a question for art and music specifically. I've heard that the proposition in November that may provide ongoing funds for art music has supplant language in it. Are there any difficulties with using this funding now on arts and music in creating programs that would need additional funding once these one-time dollars are expended? And is there someone on the panel that has an answer to the supplant language question? That might be something that we'll need to look into. It'll be something that we'll look into, and we will post a response in our FAQ page when it's up and running. So a question came in, could you share more about the plan and associated requirements? Essentially, the line in legislation is that a plan must be shared with the local school board on how to spend the funds. So there are no requirements specifically for the plan other than the plan needs to describe how the funds are going to be used, and it needs to be approved by the local school board. Such a meeting with the local school board is typically publicly noticed per Bagley-Keene Open Meetings Act. And so that would be an opportunity for the public to hear how the funds are going to be spent. Right. So similar to that, there was a question, a public hearing is required for the plan or a presentation at a public meeting. And so as I had just said, the plan needs to go before the local school board, and that is a public meeting. There is no language in the requirements in legislation about a separate hearing that needs to be held. Question came through about the template. How detailed does the plan have to be? Since there's no template, how detailed does it need to be? I think that's up to your local school board and at your school district. Because you're trying to expend a large amount of funds, there isn't any requirements in here about how detailed, what kind of line items need to be in it. The only requirement is how the funds are going to be expended. So that would be a local control detail. there was a question about salaries acceptable for operational costs, and that is something that we're going to have to do more research on and look up. We'll have a response in our FAQs. For clarification, the phrasing about a proportional amount of the funding that needs to be spent on arts and music, it's a local decision. So there isn't a specific number in legislation for what proportion of the funds needs to go to arts and music. We've emphasized in this webinar and previous presentations so far on this that it is called the Arts and Music and Instructional Materials Discretionary Block Grant. And there is specific language in legislation that it is the intent of the legislation that a proportional amount be spent on arts and music. Please clarify, only stated plans must be approved by local board, but did not mention a prior public hearing. So no, there's no requirement for a public hearing prior to the local board meeting to hear the plan and take action on it. There's a charter school related question here. We don't have representation on this panel from our charter schools division about who the charter school needs to submit their plan to, but that is something that we will work with our colleagues and update in our FAQs. So at this point, it looks like we're getting a lot of repeat questions sent into the Q&A section. For any unanswered questions, we'll continue to do our research on the CDE side and update or create, well, update the FAQ page that we're working on with your new questions. Thank you all. And then we will send out a message through our listserv when that FAQ page is up and running. Please download the link to the resources that are available on Box. And if we haven't already added a link on how to sign up for the listserv, we'll add it there because that's a live link and we can update that. And please go to that to get your listserv instructions so that you can get more information as it becomes available. So with all of that said, I would definitely like to thank, again, all of the presenters who are here today. I would like to thank Deputy Superintendent Cotton for being available to kick off this webinar. Another shameless plug for the webinar that we'll be holding next week, specifically on professional development and instructional materials. And I'd also like to thank all of you. Representatives from our local educational agencies who are doing the work, who are going to take this funding and you're going to do amazing things with it because it is a gift. It is an amazing opportunity, as Deputy Superintendent Cotton had mentioned, for us to make great gains for our students here in California. So with that said, we are going to conclude this webinar. Thank you all for joining.